Yeah.
Hello and welcome to the Disruptive Innovation Festival. The DIF is the online festival of ideas curated by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation that asks, what if we could redesign everything? My name is Leo, and in this session, students from the Master's Programme in Ecological Design Thinking and Economics for Transition at Schumacher College in Devon share their thoughts and ambitions around the design concept, small is beautiful. I'm happy to introduce the facilitator of today's session, Roberto Facquelli, who is the Ecological Design Thinking Convener at Schumacher College. And as you can see at the bottom there, Roberto is joined by 4 master's students who he will introduce in just a moment's time. And Roberto will be able to explain a little bit better than I what small is beautiful and ecological design thinking really mean. But before I hand over to Roberto, I just want to remind everyone watching this live on the session page that you can post your comments and questions throughout the session in the forum chat function just below where this is being streamed on the session page. And Roberto will be putting these to the master's students towards the end of the session. And we very much encourage you to post these questions throughout the session. So when they pop in your head, just ask away on the session page. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand things over now to Roberto in Devon. Roberto.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Schumacher College. I'm joined with some colleagues and students on our programs here. We have Berta, Pauline, Guillaume, and Camilla. Have a wave. So we're going to share with you our thoughts on Small is Beautiful. Small is Beautiful was a book written by E.F. Schumacher some 45 years ago, sharing with us his ideas of how to live an ecological life, how to be efficient with the planet's resources, how to live locally, how to run economies. And it's kind of the ethos of our courses here at Schumacher College, where we focus on heads, hands, and hearts. And this session is going to explore our students' thoughts and ideas, and they're going to share those with you. And we're going to build a little bit on what's been discussed already in the Disruptive Innovation Festival, particularly some of the stuff that Joe and John Maida talked about yesterday in the modes of design. But fundamentally, where we differ is we move from a human-centered design perspective, where humans are at the center of what we're doing in both the generation of the designs and using the things that we're developing, to an all-of-life way of thinking. And that's kind of fundamental. So we're bringing in nature and technology balanced together in the way in which we're exploring new ways of small is beautiful. So I'm going to hand you over now to Berta and Pauline, who are going to take you through a little exercise. And if you have a piece of paper and pen to hand, great. But they're going to be talking a little bit about materiality and values and what that might mean for the future of design. So Pauline and Berta, say hello. Have a go.
Hello. Okay, so we don't want to explain the exercise too much, and we just invite you to participate. We would like to invite you to close your eyes. Become aware of your body. Become aware of the clothes you're wearing, of your jewelry. For example, your watch, your earrings, your necklace, any piercings, any wristbands. Of your shoes.
Pick one item. Examine the item. Do you see something you hadn't noticed before? What function does this item fulfill for you? Does it represent something other than the function? What memories do you associate with the item?
Yeah.
We will now trace back your item. At this point, at some point you will probably have to use your imagination because you won't know. Use your pen and paper to draw this journey. Where did you buy this item? Did you take certain values into account? Was it produced in the city or country where you bought it?
If no, where was the item made in? Think of the transport necessary to ship it to the distribution store.
Think of the factory or workshop where the item was assembled. What kinds of machines were used? How were the conditions for the workers who assembled your item? Was there any waste in the production process? How about water, air, and soil pollution?
Think back further. What materials is your item made of? Cotton, rubber, synthetics, leather, metal, woods. Did the material come from the same country where the item was assembled?
Think of the individual resources. How were the conditions for the workers producing these materials? What machines were needed? How much water, fertilizer, or pesticide was needed? Did the materials have to be processed from raw material to the final material?
Finally, think of the designers of the product. Where are they located? Under which conditions do they work? What are their values?
Now look at the timeline, the whole timeline of your item. What do you feel?
Next, think of producing this item yourself in your backyard. What will you need? What skills? What tools? What resources? What conditions would you want for yourself? What safety measures would you ensure?
Would it feel different if you made the item yourself? Or if you knew the maker? If your item didn't have to travel the whole world before reaching you? What are your values for design? List your 10 most important values.
After having done this exercise ourselves, we came up with these 10 values that we think should be the values of future design. Durable, beautiful, useful, simple, local,
Ecological, ethical, inclusive, embodied, and conducive to life. So how can we apply these values in our lives? We have some examples for you.
The first one would be the transition towns. These are towns who are going back to a more local economy, community-based activities, growing organic food in order to be more resilient.
The next one is the power of making. By making something yourself, you give the product a personal value. It is more gratifying. You yourself are part of the process, and the skills you develop empower you.
Third, we have participatory design. Designing with the stakeholders so that everyone is included in creating the positive outcome. Fourth would be progressive education, adding all those values to the curriculum of the schools so that the embodiment of values start at a very young age, expanding our capacity for empathy.
Our last example is biomimicry. Biomimicry means learning from nature's wisdom, which has proved itself for millions of years through evolution. We can apply nature's principles to human needs. Thank you for participating in our exercise, and we are happy to answer your questions a little later.
Thank you. We've done a little swap of chairs at the moment. Thank you for that. We're going to also now move on to Camilla, who's going to talk to us a little bit about framing innovation from an all-of-life perspective, understanding complexity and reframing questions. So would you come
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I just want to share the screen.
Yeah.
Please. We are just sharing the screen here. Okay, so I will encourage you to think about innovation together with Gaia. So when Gaia talks about innovation. Here at Schumacher College, as Roberto mentioned in the beginning, the ethos of the college is based on ecology. So we started the master talking about Gaia theory, studying Gaia, and Gaia means the earth. For those who are not familiar with this concept, Gaia theory was created by a scientist called James Lovelock. This theory says that the earth is alive and is a self-organizing complex system that helps maintaining the conditions for life. Having said that, I want to mention Satish Kumar, which is the creator of the college here. And he always mentioned that economy and ecology should walk together. So eco in ancient Greek means oikos, home. Logi means study. Nomi means management. So economy is the management of our home, and ecology is the study of our home. So we all live in the same home, which is the earth, which is Gaia. But now we know that we are facing a global crisis. We know that our current economic system does not respect planetary boundaries. So just to mention one example, 94% of our seed diversity has disappeared. We have a challenge, and the challenge is fixing the plane while flying, changing and fixing the system we live in. So for that, we have to think about our values, our culture, and the narrative that we are promoting. I encourage us to co-create a new narrative together, to see the big picture as this picture of the elephant, to see the elephant as an elephant as a whole, and to see the problem that we are facing and the crisis as a whole as well. So one example of a new narrative are those narratives that Goethe and Pauline also mentioned in the beginning, but also this example that I have here that refers to a project that just happened in Brazil. The dream of one person, a botanist called Ricardo Cardim, turned to be a community dream and action. They are planting pieces of Atlantic forest in the city of São Paulo. With that, they are not only bringing new birds, diminishing the temperature, and tackling climate change, but also encouraging new values to be promoted. So in the end, innovating is about thinking about values as well. And we have to question ourselves, what story I want to participate, which type of innovation I want to bring to the world, how my choices will impact future generations, who is my community. So lots of transformative innovations are already happening. Cultures grow organically from the bottom up in the society. So this transformative innovation sometimes are local and small initiatives that are happening. Fritz Schumacher wrote a book, as Roberto mentioned, that is called Small is Beautiful, and already talked about the value of local. And here I'm mentioning Ezio Manzini, which is a leading thinker in design for sustainable changes and sustainable innovations. And he updated his concept saying that the small is beautiful because now it's connected. We know that we have technology, and now even a small initiative of innovation can expand its boundaries to globally. So in order to finish, we think that the future of design is designing with Gaia, is designing with nature, which is already happening. Is not having ourselves in the center as a human species, but with everyone.
Thank you, Camila, for sharing that and talk about the values. That segues us nicely into Guillaume, who's going to talk a little bit about technology and the complexity and where nature is in all this new movements of artificial intelligence. Again, that was talked about yesterday in the session. So over to you, Guillaume.
Thank you. So yeah, I'll try to weave in my subject. So in our times now where technological innovation and change are exponential and embedded in most of the dimensions of our daily life, at least in the Western world, I would like to revisit what E.F. Schumacher had to say about technology. So Schumacher basically asks how to distinguish between what is essential and non-essential, because with all these new technologies, we are overwhelmed with it. And well, Schumacher had a moral point of view and analysis of our modern industrial societies, saying that it captures our attention while imposing an undue nervous strain on us. He says that capitalism openly employs human failings as greed, envy, and avarice. So it bases analysis as well on values, what are behind our behaviors, the values that are behind it. Saying that technology has made work now utterly uninteresting and meaningless, mechanical, artificial, divorced from nature, and utilizing only the smallest part of man's potential. And yeah, so I think we should ask ourselves if technology has created an incrementation of our freedoms or a loss in it. And in order to do that, I'll take a grid of analysis of Schumacher that has 4 major points. One is the scale of it. So now we have a tendency to make things bigger and more concentrate, and he sees that as a potential harm. And he proposes go back to a small scale. Small is beautiful, something rooted locally with a concrete impact to people. And also he sees that technology has become more and more complex, making it more difficult to comprehend for its users, and creating a separation between the user and the technology. We don't even know how to fix it. We need to go through a specialist. So it's disempowering for us. Yeah, so again, Schumacher asks for we as designers, we should try to make things simple instead of complex. He also takes into account the cost of technology, saying that now the technology is really costly in order to have it. So it also excludes a lot of people who don't have the means to have that technology, creating more inequality. So we should need to make sure it's affordable for everyone. And then the fourth point, which is for me the most interesting, is that technological development can be seen as a violence against nature. So we should see if the technology we create goes against nature or with nature. And we should have non-violent technology. So as innovators, when we're faced with innovation and new techniques, I think we should take into account all these 4 points and see where we stand. And I think now we are in a crossroad for humanity with the advent of artificial intelligence and the possibility of transhumanism. So at the end of October, Sophia, a robot, was granted citizenship by Saudi Arabia, which is something quite interesting. And also the European Parliament has been researching of giving robots the status of electronic persons. So the mean of humans that was technology for an end has become is maybe trying to become a being by itself. And artificial intelligence is highly disruptive. And so I think we have to ask those questions. And transhumanism, what it is not, it is linked to artificial intelligence. And it was coined by the British biologist Julian Huxley in 1957 as a way for humanity to transcend itself, so liberate itself from its social and natural determinism. But this is an idea not coined as transhumanism that is as old as humanity. As we can find Dante Alighieri in the 14th century with his concept of the new man. We imagine the transformation of Adam going to paradise. There's also Gilgamesh in Babylon, ancient Babylon, trying to find the cure for eternal life. And something that is recurrent in humanity. So there's that question if man has to transcend his nature, and if so, by which means? Culture, new technologies, religious or spiritual practices, and that's an interesting question for me. And yeah, and also in transhumanism, also it has a narrow definition of what it is to be human, because it only sees the rational mind, the intelligence, and sees the body as an imperfection created through evolution, through the random fact of evolution and natural selection, that has only a physical support. And here at the college, we have a different approach to it as head, hand, and heart as well. So this seeing our body as something, as a beautiful creation of nature that we need to preserve. And yeah, so I think as innovators now with an immense capacity to transform reality with the technology we have, I think we have to take these questions into account and reflect if we're working alongside nature or against it. Is if there are any limits to technical progress, if there are, which ones? I don't have any answer, but I think those questions are important. Thank you.
Thank you, Guillaume. Leah, you might have to post those questions again. I think we didn't see those. If you can post them, that's great. Thank you. I might just start off by asking a question that what we're trying to do here is understand how design can make change. And we're exploring those ideas from an ecological perspective, trying to reduce the impact of the things that we are creating on our planet. But Beata and Pauline, you talked a little bit about values and value systems, and we all know that not everybody might share the same values that we have. What are the first steps in helping us move towards, maybe it's utopian, I don't know, way of thinking, of exploring your values and making them work somehow?
I think Pauline mentioned a really important point with that we should integrate it into the school system where we embody our values. And but I think as a consumer ourselves, I would say that it's very hard to fulfill all 10 values at the same time. So what we can do is that we start off with one value and then we try to keep adding those values.
Mm-hmm. Going step by step, it's important.
And you think that the new generation are already exploring these ideas?
Yeah.
and making the change. And how are you exploring these ideas here at Schumacher? What sort of things are you trying to develop as an ecological design thinker?
Well, we're definitely exploring the art of making. Like Guillaume said, that we have the intention of learning with head, heart, and hands.
How are you doing that?
So, for example, we were trying to create unity not only as a concept or just as a written agreement, but we were trying to create a statue of unity with clay, or we were creating stools ourselves to see the whole process from the trunk to the stool. Want to add something?
Yeah, we also created the mandala with all these things of nature. It's really binding to make things. It's really important to add that in our lives and in our master degree, in the curriculum of our master degree.
So our way of developing inquiry is to try and think holistically and not to just think of human-centered design, although we weave that into the processes because we understand that people can interact and have an effect on the world and planet. Camilla, you talked a little bit about Gaia and the principles of Gaia. Are there any practical tools you think that people can use to begin to have more empathy with ecology and the context of the planet, as opposed to just empathy with people?
Yeah, I think we have been seeing lots of different ways and tools. One of them that was really interesting was the wonder experience that we had. It was a whole thesis about wonder, and I think it really tackles the topic of separation that we have been experiencing, separation from nature, from ourselves. And if we encourage ourselves to mindfully listen, mindfully eat, I don't know, like the mindfulness, I think it's combined with wonder. It's a way of approaching Gaia and thinking before designing something.
So Schumacher talked about small is beautiful, and he described a way of living where you can live ethically without a large impact on the planet by making bioregionalism, working locally, developing ideas. Guillaume, how does that work in an economic sense when the world is moved on from that mindset? We've now moved on to a world where we're moving faster, technology is proliferated. Do you have any thoughts about why it is still relevant today?
Well, I think it does. First of all, I would say it's hard because I think the playing field is against it. So, but then I think there's other than economical gratification that come with. So I think first of all is try to localize your economical activity through, and also like through meeting other people, the social dimensions of it, also the ecological dimensions. So if you're gonna make something, you need to go some wood, get some wood, know about the wood. So it's a kind of it's a journey that takes
hands-on, connected,
hands-on, hard meeting the new people, and I think and also it gets more a sense of identity. So I think it's instead of the global chaos, we can try to root ourselves in our local.
Great. Anyone else? Any thoughts on that? Leo, do you have any questions from the audience that you want to share?
Yes, thank you. Thank you guys for your little presentations there. It's nice to hear what you're saying so far. And there is one question that has just come through. Are there some good examples of ecological design incorporating small is beautiful in action?
Well, we're living one right here. We're a live experiment. you know, we're an educational establishment. We have an international group of students coming to study here across science, economics, and design. They're bringing ideas together. We're planning to go and work on a project that's a local project on the Center of Imagination in India, where they're trying to encourage a different mindset. So we're taking those skills out into the world and trying these things out. So we are a living experiment where we're trying to make that work. We are living our hand, heart, and head activities. This is a college where we participate in the community, and we are developing knowledge and inquiries into where ecological design thinking can move into the future. So we are a really living experiment.
But also Totnes itself,
Transition towns,
as a transition town, is an example for Small is Beautiful, because as Pauline mentioned before, the whole movement towards local but still connected with the world, like Camila said, I think that's a good example for Small is Beautiful.
Maybe also the schools who try to have classrooms with less students, really little classrooms in order to have more quality, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, for instance, we have just done a project about food here at the college, and I think it was really interesting because we talk about design, not only designing object, but as a complex system. So we could really understand the system, and from the seed to the compost, everything that is involved, and also again with hands, heart, and head, and really see how the college itself is also improving and planting as time passes by more and more all the food that we consume here. So in some months we consume more or less 70% of the food that we consume here comes from our garden. So I think it's also an example of these local initiatives.
Yeah. You are, as Roberto said, a living experiment. How does it feel to be a living experiment?
Yeah, it's great. That means we're kind of on the front edge, but it's also we're coming at things from a very open mind, a very beginner's mind, and a lot of our way of developing our thoughts and ideas is through first-hand experience. And I think John Meader talked about that yesterday. You know, he says he still designs and still gets his hands dirty, still makes. And for us, it's really important that we don't design for other systems, but we actually are part of it and we learn from a kind of grassroots level, literally. And so the connection is developing both sort of intrinsic values within the designer. So what we're trying to do is not think about applying these things in a kind of extrinsic way, but actually making change from internally. And of course, to do that, we are looking at science, economics, and design all at the same time, developing ways of awareness, developing ways of making things happen, and basing those on live projects like the food project. We've been doing something on communication. So we're sort of sharing the way in which we want to work with other organizations, both internally and externally.
Mm-hmm. And you say that, as you mentioned, that seems like kind of cross collaboration is a massive part. And if you think about ecological design thinking, you're thinking about the wider impact socially and environmentally and economically about designs. I was just wondering, you say you work with external, you do a lot of stuff externally while also trying to build up your internal kind of capabilities and knowledge of ecological design thinking. How can people get involved with this?
Well, we believe in experiential learning, embodied learning. And so the best way to get involved is to follow some of the online learning facilities that we have, to come and do short courses. In other words, to experience something firsthand, for us is the best way of learning. We're coming at things at beginner's mind. So we have a set of values, a set of processes, a set of projects, and we try and encourage participation to actually in a co-design type way of working.
Great. Well, thanks for that.
Okay.
Sure. Well, I've expended both of my questions at the moment. I was just wondering, we do have 10 more minutes. A call out to anybody watching, to everybody watching now, that you still have a little bit of time to post your questions on the session page in these last 10 minutes. But if you've got another question for now, Roberto.
Transformative.
Yeah, you asked it. Yeah.
No, we were discussing about the ways of facing innovation and discussing like the different types of innovation. So for instance, incremental innovation or disruptive innovation or transformative innovation. And we know that some authors see that in different ways, but I personally worked for companies that we would tackle innovation more in the perspective of incremental. So for instance, bringing a new taste, a new candy like flavor for a specific audience to increment the sales of a company. And this would be seen as an incremental innovation. The other type could be the disruptive innovation, which I believe brings novelties in terms of technology and change the paradigm and the way certain industry works. For instance, as digital camera that just changed the whole analog market of cameras. And also the transformative innovation, which I mentioned a little bit in the presentation, but I strongly believe that the transformative innovation are the ones that we are trying to focus, which deals with changing paradigms and changing values. So all these values and all this system that we know that that is not sustainable anymore, like doing business the way we used to do, those transformative innovations bring the changes, changing the values. So through a really concrete object or system. And so I think this is an interesting debate as well.
You have an example for transformative innovation?
Yeah, transformative innovation, I think we have not only objects, but all the systems that we have been discussing, I think are transformative way of transforming a society, like the way, for instance, you relate to food, like buying local or even growing your own food. I would call that transformative innovation because you are
changing your lifestyle.
Yeah, you change your lifestyle as well.
And the biggest issues that we're facing is that we have an array of different lifestyles, and not everybody thinks the same way. And the challenge I think that we face is how do we encourage, if that's the right thing to do, to become more ecological in our way of exploiting resources and energy from the planet, when people want everything the earth can provide for them. It's a difficult dilemma that we're facing. And, you know, we're trying to live that by living our own lives and making the change inside, first of all, ourselves, and to explore those values.
There is another question that's just come through on the session page. So my call out was successful. And this is from George. He says, I like the ideas presented around small is beautiful, especially on technology. But he asks, does the aim to have a small environmental impact also mean that we will reduce the scope of our positive impact on the world too? And he goes on to say, surely we can go local. Surely when we go local, we also have a small impact both in our resources use and in our sphere of positive influence.
And just remind me what the question is again.
does the aim of having a small environmental impact at a local scale also hinder our ability to reduce the scope, or to increase the scope of positive impact on a global scale?
Yeah. Good question. Yeah,
I think as well we need to integrate maybe the fact that your impact might be deeper if it's local with people that you live and you maintain relation constantly, and you're embedded in social systems. So maybe as a global level, you'll have less impact. But now with the technology we have, like we're trying to root ourselves here in Devon, at the Schumacher College, but we can speak with people all around the world with a very low cost and energy. So I think in a way there's no specific contradiction, but as well I think we need to go deeper into our impact and have that, and that can only be made through a sustained relationship in time with the environment with which you interact.
And I think also we have a bioregionalism area that's limited in terms of size. There's nothing stopping you from duplicating that in another area. So it's not making a metropolis or just sticking them all together. It's having separate areas that can share the same values and processes. And food is a great example of where that can happen, where people can have some stakeholder attachment to food that's grown locally and produced locally. And one of the projects that we're kind of looking at with external people is food waste. And that's kind of on a national level. But if we try and look at it almost from a local level, start off with the bioregionals, we can think about how we might tackle these problems in a unique way that's meaningful, but then just duplicate those processes elsewhere. So it is scalable, but it's scalable in small controlled sizes as opposed to just adding and adding and adding, in which case the complexity just gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
I would say that a holistic approach would be bottom up and top down at the same time. That I think all of the actions that are exerted by the government or by the government are effective, but that with small is beautiful, we help with the bottom up to move towards the same aim.
Yeah. So. Good. Anyone else, you think? No. Great.
Okay. Well, fantastic. Well, I think we've kind of covered a lot of ground. It's good to kind of have three different angles coming at it around as an introduction to small is beautiful and ecological design thinking. It's really great to get an understanding of what you do at Schumacher College. I know I've heard of it a couple of times, and I know probably some people in the audience may have heard of Schumacher College a couple of times, but not quite understand what you do there. And it's great to get that level of insight. I thought, to kick the session off, to have, I don't think I've ever thought so much about an inanimate object as I did about my watch at the beginning of the session. But no, that was really cool. And I just having that list of, if we're going to prosper in the future, we need designers to design products and services that are, and I've got them listed here: durable, beautiful, useful, simple, local, ecological, ethical, fair, embodied, and conducive to life. I thought that was quite a poignant message. And actually, I'm not sure if you've addressed this so far, but if you're a designer, if you are a designer and you're trying to incorporate more, holistic, more ecological thinking in the design, in the work that they're doing, which one of those are? I know it's hard to change somebody's method of working, but if they were to try and incorporate more of a holistic approach, which one of those should they prioritize, or from any experiences that you've?
You want to start, right? Go on. For me, it's removing the sense of what's in it for me out of the equation. That's the fundamental difference between design thinking and ecological design thinking. Most of design thinking for me doesn't remove me and what's in it for me in terms of fame, profit, challenge, whatever. And I think the minute that we can take ourselves out of the equation, we move forward into an ecological framework?
For me, it would be conducive to life, because that's kind of encompassing all of the other values. And as Camila mentioned before, with focusing on an ecocentric view, we are taking ourselves, or we're not taking ourselves out of the equation, but we're pushing ourselves a bit more to the
as
equals, exactly.
Yeah, as equals. Yeah, we usually here when we do our projects, we usually like map the stakeholders and guarantee that Gaia, like the earth and life, is a stakeholder to talk with. So I think it's a good way of incorporating this view in any project.
Yeah, and you mentioned at the beginning that our current system is not respecting these planetary boundaries, and they're not incorporating these planetary boundaries in the design process at all.
Yeah.
Which is great. And I like the point that you made, that changing the system is a little like fixing a plane while it's flying.
Yeah.
And that, to me, that kind of conjures up kind of this impossible task. But if you could put it into simple words, like how can we ground the plane and get it fixed? You don't have to carry on with the metaphor.
Yeah, I think we are already doing. I'm quite optimistic. I think, as we mentioned, that some transformative innovations are already happening in local areas. Sometimes we feel that nothing is happening because there is nothing like huge that we see as one only element.
Yeah.
If we stop and really see, we can feel that something is already emerging. We have to keep doing, but I think it's already happening. We're already fixing the plane, I think. I hope.
Good. I think that was quite a good answer. Great. And we've only got a couple more minutes left, but I mean, we seem to have touched upon the first two presentations, but not the final one. You mentioned, I'm sorry for forgetting your name, in the middle.
Yeah.
Hi. You mentioned that you know, we tend to make technologies bigger and more complex, and the current system kind of allows for that to happen because it incentivizes bigger, more complex machinery. But we need to really actually, in your own words, I think was, we need to simplify this. We need to take the non-essentials out, and we need to, this needs to be changed. But if there was one message to take home, what would that be?
It's difficult, but yeah. Well, I think the message to take home is, I think, is just to keep these questions alive while you're doing the work, because I think there are some, at least in my own process, things that I never used to question myself. So try to keep these questions alive and see what your own mind tells you and your own discernment tells you. But I think it's, yeah. And also apply that. I know that maybe in the Western world we have a completely different need than maybe in some parts of I don't know, in South America or Africa, where people have live in a different reality. So as well, I think we also have to root into their local, keep these questions alive in a concrete, based on concrete situations.
I think designers have always juggled with things. You know, they've dealt with economics, ergonomics, aesthetics, usability. I think these days we just need to design and juggle a few more things and come up with solutions that are not detrimental. And for us on our ecological design thinking, that's fundamental about what we're trying to do, is to have a little impact, so that we're not adding to the planetary boundaries. We're considerate, we're taking an ecozoic perspective. We're looking at all of life, not just man-centered. We're looking at the exploitation of resources and trying to take a very balanced perspective in all of this, and an educated as well, which is always difficult.
Yeah. Great. Well, I think you've given a really good account for ecological design thinking as opposed to just design thinking.
Yeah.
And I know myself personally, I haven't read E.F. Schumacher's collection of essays, but I will do. And I haven't read it yet, but I would encourage everybody else watching to do the same. It's going to get more and more relevant as time goes on. And I just want to thank you all for taking the time to join us here today at the Disruptive Innovation Festival. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, just before
Yeah.
just before we go away, I just wanted to address the online audience now to make sure that they're aware of some other sessions that are coming up in the Disruptive Innovation Festival. So while we may be coming to the end of this, the second week of the DIF, we still have one more week coming up of which will feature some pre-recorded content and many live sessions from around the world. First of all, I think it would be remiss of me to say that this isn't the only session from Schumacher College at this year's DIF. Coming up next week on Thursday, the 23rd of November at 4 p.m. UK time, in the session titled The New Materialism, Matter, Making and Politics Beyond the Age of Automation, Schumacher College's own Ruth Potts and Michael Martin will be discussing and answering your questions around materialism and the transformational power of matter. So don't miss that one. That's at 4 p.m. UK time on the 23rd. And another great session next week that I think many of you may enjoy is on Monday, the 20th of November at 5 p.m. UK time. Two designers who are striving for socially and environmentally positive outcomes in their work will be joining us in the DIF Live studio in the session How to Design for Positive Impact, which kind of resonates with ecological design thinking. But it'll be good to see what the crossovers are there in that session. So look out for that one in the DIF schedule. And while we may be coming to the end of the second week at the DIF, we've had 10 days worth of really great content from all over the world. But if you've missed any live sessions or the release of pre-recorded content, then you can always just track back in the schedule and catch anything on thinkdiff.co during the catch-up period, which is for the remainder of the DIF and for 4 weeks afterwards. I wanted to highlight Schumacher College's first session at the DIF, Scales of Circular Economy, which was released on the 8th of November. Was a really interesting conversation between three guests who shared and discussed their experience of and perspectives on the circular economy in practice at the national, community and business levels. And just one more session that I wanted to point out that happened last week. Kate Rayworth, economist and author of the acclaimed book Donut Economics, who was also a visiting lecturer at Schumacher College, the Economics for Transition course. She joined us in the DIF studio to talk about why and how we should all start to think like 21st century economists. So in case you've missed anything, just go back on the thinkdiff.co website and there's a whole host of sessions that have already been released. So thanks again, Roberto and students over at Schumacher College in Devon. Until next time, it's goodbye from the DIF studio. Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from him. Bye-bye.